In a crowded military courtroom, cameras flashed as she sat in handcuffs. America's first female Navy SEAL sniper now branded a fraud and a liar. The prosecution mocked her service, whispering, spreading through the gallery as she remained silent, seemingly defeated. The judge allowed her humiliation to continue her distinguished career, crumbling before a room full of strangers. But then heavy footsteps echoed outside the doors, swung open, and everyone froze. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story and want to see more military dramas that honor our unsung heroes, please consider subscribing to our channel. The military courtroom at Naval Base San Diego buzzed with tension as journalists jostled for position behind the gallery railing. In the back row, a naval intelligence officer in dress blues watched with unusual intensity, occasionally checking a secure phone that seemed to vibrate every few minutes. "All rise," the bailiff's voice cut through the murmurs. This court-martial is now in session, the Honorable Captain Lell presiding. Captain Lell, a weathered man in his 60s, with a reputation for by-the-book proceedings, took his seat and surveyed the room with evident displeasure at the circus-like atmosphere. "Be seated," he commanded. "Let me remind everyone that while this is an open proceeding, this courtroom will maintain military discipline." His gaze swept over the gallery before settling on the prosecution table. "Commander Westlake, you may begin your opening statement." Westlake rose with the confidence of a man who had already won. "Thank you, Your Honor. The prosecution will prove beyond any reasonable doubt that Lieutenant Commander Severine Blackwood falsified military records, committed stolen valor by claiming operations and decorations she never earned, displayed insubordination during a classified operation, and through her negligence and incompetence, caused the deaths of 2 service members. As Westlake continued painting Sevy as a fame-seeking fraud who manipulated her way into claiming SEAL qualification, the gallery's whispers grew louder. "First woman to claim Trident qualification," someone muttered. "Obviously could not handle it," another voice added. "Political correctness gone wrong," a third concluded. When Apprentice rose for his opening statement, his earlier frustration was masked by professional determination. "My client's service record speaks for itself, or it would if you had proper clearance to see it." "Objection," Westlake interjected. "Counsel is implying the existence of classified materials that the Pentagon has explicitly confirmed do not exist." Sustained Captain Lell responded without hesitation. "Mr. Apprentice, this court has reviewed all relevant materials. The Department of Defense has confirmed no records exist supporting your client's claimed operations." As Apprentice attempted to pivot his defense, Sevy's hands formed tight fists under the table until her knuckles turned white, the only outward sign of the storm raging within. Commander Harrison Drake occupied the witness stand. "Commander Drake, did Lieutenant Commander Blackwood ever serve under your command in any special operations capacity?" Westlake asked. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood served as an intelligence analyst," Drake replied with practiced certainty. "She consistently overstepped her authority, attempting to insert herself into operational planning where she had no qualification. And the Yemen operation specifically," Drake's expression hardened. "She disobeyed direct orders during the Al-Mara operation, abandoning her post to join a forward team. Her unauthorized actions resulted in unnecessary casualties." When Apprentice began cross-examination, his frustration became increasingly evident. "Commander Drake, what specifically was the objective of the Al-Mara operation?" "That information remains classified. The location of the operation classified. The names of the team members allegedly endangered by my client. Classified for operational security." Apprentice approached the bench. "Your Honor, it is rather convenient that everything that might exonerate my client is classified, while everything damning is somehow admissible." Captain Lell's expression remained impassive. "The classification determinations have been made by the proper authorities. Counselor, proceed with questions you can ask." As Apprentice returned to his table, Sevy's face remained composed, but for a brief moment her eyes unfocused. In her mind flashed images of blood on her hands, radio chatter drowned by gunfire, a sandstorm, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors during a hot extraction. Reality and memory blurred momentarily before she forced herself back to the present. The naval doctor who took the stand next delivered perhaps the most damaging testimony with clinical detachment. He referenced psychological evaluations suggesting Sevi suffered from delusions of grandeur and fabricated heroism to compensate for gender-based insecurities in a male-dominated field. It is not uncommon, the doctor explained, adjusting his glasses for individuals who feel marginalized to create elaborate fantasies of exceptional achievement. In Commander Blackwood's case, these fantasies manifested as claims of covert operations and heroism that simply did not occur. Spectators in the gallery openly snickered. One whispered too loudly. They let her play Seal and people died. During the recess that followed, Apprentice confronted Sevi in a private conference room, its bland walls and fluorescent lighting emphasizing the gravity of their situation. "Sevi, I cannot defend you if you will not talk to me," he said, loosening his tie in frustration. "The classified operation records that would prove your innocence do not exist anymore," she interrupted quietly. "They were purged." The Apprentice stared at her in disbelief. "That is impossible. Not even the Secretary of the Navy could." "You are not asking the right questions, Orion." Her voice remained controlled, but intensity burned in her eyes. "Ask yourself who benefits if I am discredited. You are facing dishonorable discharge, possibly prison. Help me help you." Sevi looked at him directly for what felt like the first time. Some oaths matter more than freedom. When court resumed, Westlake delivered his final blow, a surprise witness. The prosecution calls Chief Petty Officer Talon Riker. As Riker approached the stand, a muscular man in his mid-30s with the confident bearing of a special operator, Sevi's composure cracked momentarily. She leaned toward Apprentice. That man was never in Yemen. Riker's testimony was devastating. With convincing detail, he described Sevi's alleged fabrications and incompetence during operations she claimed to have led. "Commander Blackwood was not part of the Yemen extraction team," Riker stated firmly. "I was team lead on that operation, and I can confirm she was nowhere near the target zone. Her claims of leading the mission are a complete fabrication." As Westlake guided Riker through a detailed account that systematically dismantled Sevi's claimed accomplishments, she studied him with renewed focus. Something about his uniform caught her attention. A subtle detail in his service ribbons and the placement of his trident pin that contradicted his claimed experience. It was the kind of minute error only someone intimately familiar with special operations protocols would recognize. For the first time since the trial began, a ghost of a smile touched Sevi's lips. When Apprentice rose for cross-examination, Sevi passed him a note. He glanced at it, frowned in confusion, then began questioning. "Chief Riker, you mentioned serving with SEAL Team 3 during Operation Serpent Hammer. Could you tell the court when that operation took place? February 2022? Eastern Syria." Riker answered confidently. "And who was your commanding officer during that operation?" Commander Vartanian. Apprentice consulted his notes. "Could you describe the mission patch for that operation?" Riker hesitated for the first time. "Standard SEAL Team 3 insignia with a snake motif. Would it surprise you to learn that Commander Vartanian was not assigned to SEAL Team 3 until April 2022, or that Operation Serpent Hammer was a Marine Corps mission, not a SEAL operation?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Riker's face. "There might be some confusion about the operation name. We use different code names sometimes. Or perhaps," Apprentice suggested, "there is confusion about whether you were there at all." "Objection," Westlake interjected. "Counsel is badgering the witness." Sustained, Captain Lell agreed. "Move on, Mr. Apprentice." Despite the judge's intervention, a seed of doubt had been planted. Several officers in the gallery exchanged glances, and the naval intelligence officer in the back row slipped out phone pressed to his ear. As the day's session concluded, Westlake appeared less triumphant than before. Sevi remained outwardly calm, but a new alertness had entered her eyes. "What did you see in his uniform?" Apprentice asked as they prepared to leave. "His trident is mounted incorrectly," she replied quietly. "And he has ribbons for operations that happen simultaneously in different theaters. Impossible unless he can be in two places at once." "Will that be enough?" Sevi shook her head. "Not for this court, but it might be enough for someone else." As military police approached to return her to custody, Sevi straightened her shoulders. "Tomorrow will be interesting," she said, offering no further explanation as they led her away. Commander Westlake paced before the witness stand, with the confidence of a matador delivering the final thrust. Chief Petty Officer Riker sat ramrod straight, his testimony having systematically dismantled what remained of Sevi's credibility, despite the minor inconsistencies Apprentice had managed to highlight. So to be clear, Westlake said, positioning himself where the jury could see both him and Sevi. At no point did Lieutenant Commander Blackwood participate in the extraction operation she claims led to her receiving the Silver Star. Before Riker could answer, the courtroom doors opened with deliberate weight. Admiral R. Kingston, Chief of Naval Operations, the highest-ranking officer in the Navy and first woman to hold the position. Her 4-star shoulder boards caught the light as she stepped fully into the room. Captain Lell rose automatically, surprise momentarily breaking through his judicial demeanor. "Admiral, this is highly irregular." Kingston did not acknowledge him. Her focus remained straight ahead as she walked with measured steps directly toward where Sevi sat. The click of her shoes against the floor echoed in the stunned silence. Sevi rose instantly to attention, muscle memory overriding everything else. Her eyes locked forward, chin lifted, as Kingston stopped directly in front of her. In the stunning silence that followed, Kingston raised her hand in a formal, perfect salute. Without hesitation, Sevi returned the salute with equal precision. Kingston spoke, her voice carrying through the room without needing to be raised. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, the President sends his regards and regrets that Operation Shadowfall's details cannot be declassified at this time." The courtroom erupted in confused murmurs. Journalists frantically scribbled notes or tapped on phones. Several military officers in the gallery exchanged alarmed glances. Kingston turned to face the judge, her bearing making it clear she was not requesting permission, but simply informing him of what would happen next. "Captain Lell, have here an executive order signed by the President of the United States." She handed a folder to the bailiff, who delivered it to the visibly rattled judge. "These proceedings are hereby suspended. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood is being reassigned effective immediately." Westlake lurched to his feet, his previously confident demeanor crumbling. "Admiral, with all due respect, this court has jurisdiction." Kingston cut him off with a glare that could freeze flame. "Commander Westlake, your security clearance is hereby revoked pending investigation. Military police will escort you to processing." Two MPs moved immediately toward a stunned Westlake, whose face drained of color as the implication sank in. Commander Drake half rose from his seat in the gallery, then thought better of it when Kingston's gaze swept the room. He sank back down, suddenly very interested in studying his hands. "This tribunal," Kingston addressed the court, her voice carrying undeniable authority, "was convened based on falsified evidence as part of a deliberate campaign to discredit an American hero. Those responsible will be identified and court-martialed." Drake and Riker exchanged panicked glances across the room. Riker's hand moved unconsciously to adjust his incorrectly placed trident pin, but stopped when he realized what he was doing. Kingston continued, her tone softening slightly. "The operation Lieutenant Commander Blackwood led rescued 17 hostages, including 2 senators' children, from an enemy black site. The details remain classified, but the President has authorized me to confirm her Silver Star citation was earned through extraordinary heroism." Apprentice looked at Sevi in amazement, finally understanding her silence. She remained at attention, eyes forward, but something had changed in her posture, as though an immense weight had been lifted. Kingston nodded to Sevi. "You are needed at the Pentagon, Commander. A helicopter is waiting." As Kingston turned to leave, Sevi fell into step behind her. The gallery erupted in chaos. Journalists shouting questions, officers conferring in urgent whispers, spectators trying to make sense of the dramatic reversal. Captain Lell banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order to a proceeding that had fundamentally transformed in the space of minutes. At the door, Kingston paused, turning back to address the room one final time. "Let this serve as a reminder. The nature of the conflicts we face today means our greatest heroes often serve in silence. Remember that before you question someone's service." As they exited, Sevi noticed Commander Drake being approached by 2 serious-looking officers in suits, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Their eyes met briefly, and the color drained from Drake's face as he realized the depth of his miscalculation. Outside the courtroom, a phalanx of security personnel created a corridor through the gathered media. Questions flew at them from all directions. Admiral Kingston, what is Operation Shadowfall, Commander Blackwood? Did you really lead a SEAL team? Is this political interference in military justice? Neither woman acknowledged the questions as they moved with purpose toward a waiting staff car. Only when they were inside with the doors closed did Kingston's formal demeanor soften slightly. That was quite a performance, Commander, she said as the car pulled away. Maintaining your silence even when it meant facing dishonor. I took an oath, Sevi replied simply. Kingston nodded. Not everyone remembers their oaths when facing personal consequences. She looked out the window at the naval base passing by. We have been monitoring the situation since the charges were first filed, but needed to let it play out to identify all involved parties. Drake Sevi said the name carrying the weight of betrayal and others. The conspiracy goes deeper than one vindictive commander. They rode in silence to the helicopter pad where a Seahawk waited rotors, already spinning. As they approached, Kingston had to raise her voice above the noise. The president wants a full briefing. You will have your chance to tell the whole story, classified sections and all. The flight to Washington was a blur for Sevi. After months of isolation and scrutiny, the rapid reversal left her processing multiple emotions. Relief, certainly, but also a simmering anger at how close Drake's plan had come to succeeding. When they landed at the Pentagon, another security detail met them, escorting them through back corridors to avoid the press that had already gathered at the main entrances. News traveled fast, especially news involving the C&O personally intervening in a court-martial. As Sevi sat, Kingston poured 2 cups of coffee from a carafe on a side table. Black right. Sevi accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. The simple gesture of normalcy of being treated as a peer rather than a prisoner nearly undid her composure. Kingston settled behind her desk. I apologize for not intervening sooner. We needed to identify everyone involved in the conspiracy. Drake was selling intelligence to private military contractors. Sevi replied, the coffee cup warm between her palms. I found proof during Shadowfall. Operational details, team movements, extraction points. Kingston nodded grimly, and rather than face espionage charges, he tried to discredit you first. Erased mission records, planted false evidence, used his connections to initiate the court-martial. He knew no one would believe a woman could lead a SEAL operation, Sevi said without bitterness. Used society's bias as cover. The arrogance of mediocre men never ceases to amaze me. Kingston's smile was razor-sharp. He is facing 20 years minimum, and Riker never served a day in special operations. Drake recruited him from administration, built him a false identity. He will trade information for leniency. I expect Kingston set her cup down. The president is awarding you the Navy Cross. The ceremony will be private, but your name will be cleared publicly. Sevi hesitated, turning the coffee cup in her hands. Ma'am, the other operators on my team, their families deserve to know they died. Heroes not because of my alleged incompetence. Kingston's expression softened. They will. The president has authorized partial declassification of Shadowfall to honor their sacrifice. Their families will receive proper recognition with full benefits restored. Sevi finally allowed herself a moment of emotion, blinking rapidly. Thank you, Admiral. Kingston studied her for a moment. When I earned my first command, a superior officer told me I would never belong, that I was taking a position from someone more deserving. She stood and walked to the window. That moment in court today, that salute, that was for both of us. She turned back to Sevi, offering another salute. The Navy is better because you refused to quit, Commander. Later that evening, in a secure briefing room deep within the Pentagon, Sevi stood before a panel that included the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, and several other officials whose identities remained classified. For 3 hours, she detailed Operation Shadowfall, the intelligence gathering that had led to the discovery of the hostage site, the improvised extraction when the primary plan failed, and the evidence of Drake's treachery she had uncovered. When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Finally, the Secretary of Defense spoke. I believe I speak for everyone when I say we owe you an apology, Commander Blackwood. The system failed you. The system worked eventually, sir, she replied. That is what matters. As the officials filed out, one remained behind a silver-haired man in civilian clothes whose security badge indicated the highest clearance level. You showed remarkable restraint, Commander, he said when they were alone. Most would have broken operational security to save themselves. With respect, sir, that was never an option, he smiled. And that is precisely why the president is interested in your next assignment. He slid a sealed folder across the table. Your eyes only. Consider it an opportunity to rebuild what Commander Drake tried to destroy. 6 months later, Commander Severine Blackwood walked the perimeter of the training grounds. The classified assignment from the president had kept her busy. A new joint task force combining elements from multiple special operations communities focused on countering the very network of private military contractors that Drake had been selling information to. The task force operated in the shadows, just as she preferred, but her name had become something else entirely. The public story of her vindication had made headlines for weeks. Naval Times ran a cover story. Congress launched inquiries into record-keeping practices for classified operations, and most significantly, applications from women to special operations selection courses had tripled. That last development was why she had returned to Coronado today, not for the publicity which she still avoided, but to quietly observe what her ordeal had helped create. Commander Blackwood. Sevi turned to find a young female ensign approaching, clearly nervous but determined. She snapped to attention with textbook precision. At ease, Ensign Sevi said, gesturing for the young officer to walk alongside her. Ensign Merritt, ma'am, I have been hoping to meet you. The young woman fell into step beside her. I am preparing for SEAL qualification assessment next month. That gives you 4 weeks to improve your water confidence, Sevi replied, noticing the slight hesitation in Merritt's expression. The underwater knot tying is where most candidates struggle first. Merritt's eyes widened. How did you know that was my concern? Your hands, Sevi gestured. You have been practicing. The skin around your knuckles shows it. Merritt smiled. They say you could identify a target from 3 kilometers based on the way they moved. People exaggerate, Sevi said, but her slight smile suggested otherwise. How is your class responding to having you there? Merritt straightened her shoulders. Some of the men still think women have no place in special operations. They say the standards must have been lowered. They say you were some kind of political experiment. And what do you think I think they are saying? That because they are afraid I might outlast them, ma'am? Sevi nodded approvingly. They are saying I am the reason they have opened more special operations roles to women. Are you not? That is giving me too much credit, Sevi replied. Those changes were already in motion. I was just in the right place at the wrong time. They walked in silence for a moment, watching the trainees in the distance struggle through the surf with heavy boats held overhead. Any advice, ma'am? Merritt finally asked. Sevi considered for a moment. There will be people who say you do not belong. Your job is not to prove them wrong. Your job is to complete the mission. Is that what you did? Focused on the mission when they tried to destroy your career. The mission comes first always. Sevi looked out toward the ocean. Everything else is secondary. A third candidate who had been quiet until now finally spoke up. How did you deal with it, knowing that even after you proved yourself, they still tried to take everything away from you? The group fell silent, aware they had ventured into sensitive territory. Sevi studied the young woman who had asked, recognizing the genuine need behind the question. By remembering why I was there in the first place, she said, not for recognition, not to be the first or only woman, but because there was work that needed doing, and I was capable of doing it. She looked around at their faces. Remember, it is not about being the first or the only. It is about making sure you are not the last. In the distance, a helicopter approached, landing on the pad near the command building. Admiral Kingston emerged, now serving as special assistant to the president for military affairs after her retirement from active duty. She spotted Sevi in the group, raising a hand in greeting, but not approaching, understanding the importance of what was happening. Looks like my meeting has arrived, Sevi told the group. If you will excuse me. As the candidates dispersed, returning to their training with renewed purpose, Sevi walked toward Kingston. Quite a fan club you have there, Commander Kingston observed as they walked toward headquarters. Future operators, Sevi corrected. If they make it through, the dropout rate for female candidates has decreased by 30% since your story broke. Correlation is not causation, Admiral. Kingston smiled. Always the analyst. She gestured toward the building. Shall we? The others are waiting? Inside a secure conference room, several senior officers and intelligence officials were reviewing materials spread across the table. They came to attention as Kingston and Sevi entered. "As you were," Kingston said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "Commander Blackwood, would you bring everyone up to speed on Kingfisher?" Sevi moved to the front of the room, activating a display screen that immediately filled with operational data. Phase 1 of Operation Kingfisher is complete. We have identified the primary financial channels supporting the PMC network across 3 continents. For the next hour, she detailed the intelligence her task force had gathered, the connections to foreign intelligence services, and the recommended next steps. Throughout her presentation, she noted Kingston studying her with what looked like pride. When the briefing concluded and the others had filed out, Kingston lingered. "The Intelligence Committee briefing went well," she said. "Operation Kingfisher is approved for Phase 2. They are requesting you lead it personally." Back into the shadows, Sevi nodded. "Where I work best," Kingston smiled. "Some battles are fought in silence, but they still deserve to be honored." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "There is something else. The Navy wants to use your story in their recruiting materials." Sevi stiffened slightly. "With respect, Admiral, I am not interested in becoming a poster child." "I told them you would say that," Kingston replied. "But consider this. Your story has already inspired a new generation. Imagine what it could do if properly told." Sevi looked unconvinced. "Think about it," Kingston added. "No decision needed today." They walked outside where the sun had burned away the morning fog. In the distance, the Buds trainees were visible on their run back from the obstacle course instructors, pushing them to maintain pace despite obvious exhaustion. "How is Apprentice doing?" Kingston asked as they watched the trainees. "Lieutenant Commander Apprentice is settling into his new role with the JAG Corps, nicely," Sevi replied. "His experience with my case has made him something of an expert on classification issues in military justice." And Drake sentenced to 25 years at Leavenworth. His testimony helped identify 3 other officers involved in selling information. Kingston nodded satisfied. And Riker dishonorable discharge, 5 years in military prison. Apparently he is writing a memoir claiming he was coerced. There is always someone trying to profit from deception. Kingston shook her head in disgust. They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the female candidates they had spoken with earlier rejoined their class determination evident in their stride. "You know," Kingston said, "when I first joined the Navy, my superiors told me I would never command a ship that women lacked the temperament for combat leadership." She smiled at the memory. "Last month, I attended the commissioning of the USS R. Kingston, an Arleigh Burke class destroyer with my name on it. Quite a journey," Sevi acknowledged, "for both of us." Kingston turned to face her. "The world is changing, Commander. Slower than it should, but changing nonetheless. What happened to you should never have occurred, but how you responded, your integrity throughout that, made a difference beyond your own career." Sevi nodded, uncomfortable with praise but recognizing the truth in Kingston's words. "I have a meeting with the new Spec Warcom Commander," Kingston said, checking her watch. "Will you join us for dinner later? The Secretary of the Navy would like to discuss your next promotion, Captain Blackwood." Sevi tested the sound of it. "I cannot say it does not have a nice ring to it." Actually, Kingston's eyes twinkled. "The discussion involves a bit more than captain." As Kingston walked away, Sevi remained for a moment, watching the training continue on the beach below. From her vantage point, she could see the full sweep of the facility, the obstacle course, the grinder, where so many had broken, and the ocean beyond, vast and unforgiving. She thought about the classified folder waiting in her quarters, the operation that would take her team deep into hostile territory once again. She thought about the young women who had approached her today, their determination to prove themselves in a world that still questioned their place. Most of all, she thought about that moment in the courtroom when everything had changed with a single salute. Not because it had saved her career, but because it represented something more important. The recognition that honor and service transcended gender, transcended politics, transcended everything except the mission itself. The sun glinted off her commander's insignia as she turned away from the view, heading toward her next briefing. There would always be another mission, another challenge, another barrier to break. And she would be ready not for the recognition, but because that was who she was. in silence with honor, doing what needed to be done.